Shalom, shalom. Excited to continue our learning of the Chinuch together, Sefer HaChinuch, to learn together. And we're today here on Mitzvah 4. I hope you will join us in our learning. And Mitzvah 4 is the beginning of Shmot, the beginning of Exodus. As you know, the Sefer, the book, goes through the Torah, beginning to end, and lists the 613 mitzvot through the order of the Torah. So now is our first mitzvah in Sefer Shmot of Exodus, and it's Kiddush Ha-Chodesh, Kiddush Ha-Chodesh, the sanctification of the month. It says here, L'kadesh chadashim ula'abed shanim b'veit din gadol b'chachma samuch ba'aretz v'likboa moadei hashana al pi oto Kiddush shenemar Ha-Chodesh hazeh lechem rosh chadashim. That this is the mitzvah to sanctify the months and intercalate the years at the Beit Din, at the religious court, that is greatest in wisdom and ordained with authority in the land of Israel, and to set the dates of the year's festivals according to the sanctification. And then we learn from the pasuk, from the verse here in Shmot, this month shall be for you the beginning of months. Ha-Chodesh hazeh lechem rosh chodashim. So Kiddush Ha-Chodesh. Now, to contextualize this within the Parsha, within the Sefer, really, of Shmot, is to understand that we're in Parshat Bo. We're in Parshat Bo, and actually what's fascinating is we're within the Makot still. We've just seen the 9th plague, and we're prior to the 10th plague. So it's a very strange place to put this mitzvah. And we are still in slavery as Israelites. And this is, of course, before the Exodus. Now, some commentators, of course, want to read the Torah out of order, right? But according to the order as we have it in the Torah, it's a very interesting place. It's almost as if we are empowering the Israelites in the moment of darkness still, right? We see the plague of darkness. And then all of a sudden, the light of the moon. The empowerment of time to sanctify our own time, right? That Klal Yisrael is given the mitzvah that we are to control our time to some degree. We are to be partners with HaKadosh Baruch Hu in setting the calendar, which is very, very fascinating. So too, we should think about how we can empower others in the sanctity of their time. For example, workers who don't have a day off of work, or workers who don't have any breaks in their work. Very important to think about the dignity of time. And that's part of what happens with Rosh Chodesh here, is that Hashem doesn't just say, here's the time, but I want you to come together. I want the courts to have the responsibility of accepting the edut, of accepting the testimony, of seeing the new moon and declaring the new month. Now, once we move beyond that era, the rabbinic courts today don't have the authority to just set months, of course. We operate by the calendar that was set up by the Chachamim, by the sages. But back then, there was a whole process, as it says, those who were ordained in the authority of Israel, in an unbroken chain, that they would bring this type of testimony to the courts. But today, we operate by a calendar. And we keep going here, and it says, V'chein tichlo mitzvah zo, mitzvat ibor hashana. Lefi sheyasod mitzvat kiddush chodesh kadei sheyasu Yisrael moedei Hashem b'moedam uchmochein mitzvat ibor hashana mizeh hayasodi. That this precept in the Torah also includes the religious obligation to intercalate the year by adding a lunar month when necessary. We'll explain this in a moment. For the fundamental reason of the precept of sanctifying each month is that the Israelites might observe the holy days given by Hashem in their proper times. Like, for example, we need Pesach to be in springtime. So we can't just operate on a solar calendar where things are going to end up all over the place. So this additional month we can add in. There's an Adar 1, and sometimes there's an Adar Sheni. And this enables us to reconcile the lunar calendar with the solar calendar, because we're committed to having both. But the mitzvah here is to be aligned with the lunar calendar. Now, interesting what just happened here. The Chinuch, based on the Rambam, says that those two mitzvot are actually one. In counting the Taryag, in counting the 613, there are two different things. There's setting the calendar. There's setting the month, the new month, sanctifying the month, and then there is adding a lunar month when necessary. This Ibur Hashana. Now the Ramban, the Chinuch notes that the Ramban counts this as two different mitzvot in his Taryag, in his 613. The sanctification of the month is one, and the intercalation of the year is another. Right, two different mitzvot. But the Rambam and the Chinuch here want to say that this ultimately is one. He goes on, for the Jewish people reckon their months and holy days according to the days of the lunar year, which are 354 days, 8 hours, and 876 parts, breaking down as 48 minutes and 40 seconds. And it is less than the solar year, he explains, by 10 days, 21 hours, and 204 parts, which breaks down as 11 minutes and 20 seconds. And so there's a complicated process of how the sages put together this calendar to ensure that we would have our holidays set at the right time, and that we're observing these holidays in the way that the Jews have throughout history. So today on leading up to Rosh Chodesh, to the new month, the celebration each month, we have Birchat Ha-Chodesh in Shul, where we sanctify the new month that's coming up. And then, of course, we have Rosh Chodesh itself. Rosh Chodesh will sometimes be 1 day or 2 days, and it says in Ta'anit 28b, in the Talmud, the tractate of Ta'anit 28b, that there's a minhag, a custom, to recite a shortened version of Hallel on Rosh Chodesh. When it's the Rabbanan, meaning when there's a rabbinic law to recite Hallel, certain holidays, and other cases actually of salvation, that we say the full Hallel. But when it's minhag, when it's a custom, it says here in the Talmud, that then we say a shortened version on Rosh Chodesh in the morning. So why do we say Hallel at all? And I think we can look to the Aruch HaShulchan. There's a lot of interesting places. If you look at the Aruch HaShulchan, Orach Chaim 422.6, he says there's two ideas behind Birkat HaLevana, the blessing of the moon. The first idea is the celebration of the miracle of the natural order, right? That we exist in a natural order. We could have lived in a world of randomness, of chaos. And to be sure, if you study weather and patterns and other elements of order and science, there certainly is chaos and disorder. But there's also an order that's in place that is a blessing we've received, right? And the plagues, one of the traumatic parts of the plagues is a break in order. And the Israelites may have been scared amidst all these plagues that maybe there is no order after all. And then in the midst of the plagues, we have Kiddush Ha-Chodesh to remind us that there is indeed an order in the world. So this blessing and this joy that we don't rely on miracles in Somchin al Nes, but actually we rely on the natural order. We may pray for interventions or the like, but we rely on the natural order and we exist, we operate as though only the natural will occur. That's the first bit of saying Hallel on Rosh Chodesh. The second bit that Aruch HaShulchan suggests is Geula, redemption. And in fact, if you look at what we say on Birchat HaChodesh, we say, Misha asa nisim lavotenu v'ga'alo tam ma'avdut l'cherut, hu yigalo tanu b'karov. Okay, and it goes on. That God, who performed these miracles for our forefathers and our matriarchs, and redeemed them from slavery to freedom, may God redeem us soon and gather in the dispersed, and it goes on. And so that this is the first mitzvah given to Moshe, right? There were mitzvot b'nei Noach, and then there's mitzvot given to the matriarchs and patriarchs, and then of course this is the first mitzvah given to Moshe Rabbeinu, to Moses, and then there's Sinai, and there's post-Sinai, and other layers. But this mitzvah occurring in the midst of slavery, that when we say this, they weren't sure of the outcome. They were scared. All they knew was slavery, that they now sought redemption. And so it's so too for us, the moon can represent the light amidst the darkness. The moon, the Yereach or the Levana, can represent redemption to come. Collective redemption, universalistic. Klal Yisrael's redemption, particularistic. And personal redemption as well. I recall I was leading Seder for American soldiers in Germany some years ago, and I got off a train in Germany, and I was it was the wrong stop, and it was the middle of the night. It was like 1 or 2 in the morning, and I was very scared. I was in the middle of nowhere. There were no more trains going. I had no idea where to go. I had no phone, and I looked up in the sky, and I saw this full moon, almost full moon, and I realized I hadn't said Birkat Ha-Chodesh yet. Excuse me, I hadn't said Kiddush Levana yet. Kiddush Levana, the sanctifying of the moon, up till the 15th day. And I stood out there and I davened it. I benched the Chodesh, celebrating the cycles of the natural order and the potential of geula, of redemption, in a way that was very, very meaningful. And then somehow, and I don't say it was a miracle or anything, another train arrived, and I was able to ultimately get to my destination. And so I think that the moon represents for us a level of faith. Not only in that the slaves were redeemed, but so too that will happen for us as well. And so here we get to the point of stability and change, right? We see here that the moon is cyclical, it's predictable. Let's bracket David Hume and skepticism. How do we know the sun will rise tomorrow? How do we know we'll see the moon? But there's a predictability of nature, but also it represents the ongoingness of time, right? Because Chodesh is connected to Chadash, something new. The new moon represents a new era. Just like Shana, a year, represents Meshaneh, change. So the word for month and the word for year is all about newness, novelty, and about change. And here we can reflect for a moment on Jewish theories of time. Of course, one theory of time, of intellectual history, is decline, right? We call this Yeridat Hadorot. That we were once at the pinnacle, whether that was Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden, or it was the matriarchs and patriarchs being close to God, or this was Har Sinai, Mount Sinai, or other periods of greatness in Jewish history. And ever since, we're declining. We're getting further from God, further from truth, further from Sinai. We are like nothing anymore. We're katanim, we're small people. So that's one idea out there. Another idea is that history, and we see this mostly among the Greeks, is cyclical. Every year there's a new year, the same months, the same events. There's no real change, right? There's nothing new under the sun. A third notion is progress, right? We are getting closer to Or HaMashiach, to the light of redemption, and we're constantly progressing. And then in post-modernity, and we find this in Kabbalah as well, a non-linear progress. Yes, we progress, but there's constant steps back. There's darkness, and then there's light. There's steps back, and then there's jumps forward. And interesting to note in Kabbalah as well, actually, that the past is actually now, right? It's not that that history actually changes, that we still live within the sin of the Garden of Eden. That's now. We're in the Garden of Eden, right? The Mabul is still happening for some of the Kabbalists, right? The flood is occurring now, right? Sinai is still, we could still hear the voice of Sinai, right? That for a lot of the Kabbalists, right, that this is not history. We live in the moments that our ancestors lived in, right, in many ways. So here's the last idea. And of course, if you have thoughts or questions, please feel free to post them so we can be in dialogue. And if I see after you write them, I can also try to be responsive there as well. So we see here the mitzvah given to Moshe around, and to Klal Yisrael, around sanctifying the month, and reconciling the lunar and solar calendars. And I want to just close with a fascinating Midrash from Masechet Chulin 60b, from the Talmudic tractate of Chulin on the 60b page. And here's what it says over here. Rabbi Shimon ben Pazi posed the following contradiction. It's written, and God created two great luminaries, which implies that the sun and moon were created equally great. And it's written right after that the great luminary to dominate the night, meaning the sun, is greater than the moon. So how are these to be reconciled? They're created equal, but the sun seems to be created greater. Initially, both luminaries were created equal, but then the moon said before the God, the master of the universe, is it possible for two kings to utilize the same crown? The moon is concerned. Coexist, two emperors, two kings, co-rabbis, right? Husband and wife, we're going to control all this together. Who's in charge? God said to her, the moon, indeed, go and diminish yourself. The moon then said, God, because I said a correct thing, Before you, I must diminish myself? And God said to the moon in consolation, go and rule by day and by night. She then said to God, what is the greatness in that? For of what use is a candle in the daytime? Fine, the moon exists in the day, but no one can see. What is that? Fine, the sun is gone at night, and you're giving me all of the 24 hours. But a candle in the daytime? God said, go and let Israel reckon the days and years through you. Oh, she said to God, but the sun also serves this capacity, for they cannot but reckon the seasons by the sun. As it is written, and they, the two large luminaries, shall serve for signs and for festivals and for days and years. God replied, go, and the righteous will be called by your name, such as Jacob the small, Shmuly the small, and David the small. Nevertheless, God saw that the moon was not mollified. And this is a fascinating chazal and a fascinating midrash. Therefore, God said, bring me an atonement. Bring me a kapara on my behalf for having diminished the moon. As if God says, Kivyochel, that God has sinned. That God has sinned by offending the moon, making the moon smaller. Does God do tshuva? Is this some kind of process theology where God regrets what has been done? Fascinating. So when we also look at the moon, we can experience the humility of our leadership. That in fact, two great luminaries can coexist. And when we push back against that, we may ourselves, in fact, be the ones who are diminished. So I give us all the bracha. We should keep learning Sefer Achinuch together. We should continue to sanctify the months together. Even amidst our hardest times, the darkest times of slavery and the like, we still sanctify the moon because that's when the mitzvah was given, right? Knowing that at the end of the day, the next month may be our very month to bring redemption. If not the full redemption, then partial. And maybe this is also partially why we say the shortened version of Hallel, of the celebratory psalms on Rosh Chodesh, as if to say that yes, we don't expect the full redemption in the coming month, but we yearn step by step to get closer to a world that is repaired, where we address the suffering and oppression in the world. We bring healing to others and to ourselves. Have a wonderful day. Thank you so much.